Hey there, welcome to Tech Talks. I'm Noel from ALPHA Distribution Technologies, and with me in studio today, Marinus van Heerden.
Thank you, Noel. Hi, everybody.
Welcome, Marinus.
Thanks.
So in this episode, Marinus and I are going to be discussing solution building. All right, so this is a service that we at ALPHA Technologies offer our clients and resellers. And today we are going to learn how to build a solution from a client brief. So with there being so many audio-visual devices on the market today, it's actually quite difficult for end users to sort of choose, what is going to suit their business needs most.
Absolutely.
All right. And with so many capabilities in AV, it's true that companies are now leveraging the power of audio-visual technologies to drive success within their businesses. So I know that it can get quite confusing, and this is why today we're going to, with Marinus's assistance, see how to work through all the clutter so that we come through with a decent solution based on a client's brief. So Marinus, I want to ask you a quick question. What are the different types of requests for solutions that we receive?
Yeah, so that could differ widely. The main thing, I guess, would probably be tenders, if it's a big spec. So somebody else already wrote a tender spec, either be it our products or our competitors' products.
Okay.
And then we either, depending on the tender type, we obviously can either suggest our own products that would suit the bill, or sort of suit the bill. Like you mentioned, there's so many products out there in the market. And all of them, or most of them at least, has a couple of things that differentiated from our products perhaps, but then there's of course stuff like a projector screen. A projector screen's a projector screen. There's a couple of different things like how you would control it, but it's very generic and easy to integrate. We get some other stuff that's obviously really difficult to integrate with each other, or to compare to each other depending on what the requirement is. And then of course sometimes we get the opportunity to spec a solution from the bottom. So we get invited to, with one of our integration partners, get invited to a site, meet the end user, get to speak to them in person and actually get the requirement and then design a solution suited to that requirement. With our products, sometimes maybe an integration of some of the other products in the market just to complete the solution, and to get the customer what they need. Then, of course, sometimes we just get a WhatsApp message or a couple of photos.
Then we have to thumbsuck from there, right?
Yeah, exactly. But yes, like my preferred way of receiving solutions definitely is email. By far. It's just something that I could read repetitively and really read between the lines and make sure that we do a solution that's suited for the requirements.
Okay.
Verbal discussions can also, it's important to have verbal discussions, but it's also important to have something down on paper.
Yeah, verbally you can leave a lot to misinterpretation and all that, right? So when it's on paper, at least we know, okay, well, this is what we're working with, and this is what the brief, the brief needs to be fulfilled based on this.
100%. Correct.
Right, awesome. Okay, that's great. So should we look at an example of a client brief? Let's get right into it, guys. So I'm going to read it off here if you don't mind. It's quite lengthy. It's quite detailed. So for those of you watching, maybe take a couple of notes. And we will work through this process to see how Marinus over here builds our solution.
Absolutely.
Okay, so this is going to be something that we get asked quite frequently, so it's quite easy, but we're going to show you the process so that you can understand how to build your solution from that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a brief here for a boardroom, a 12-seater boardroom. Okay. The request is for an audio system and a UC solution. Okay, the client requires a projector, motorized screen, PTZ camera, and microphones. All right, we've been made aware that there is a bulkhead above the boardroom table where we can put ceiling speakers in if the requirement calls for it.
Yeah.
Okay. The boardroom area is approximately 8 meters by 6 meters by 2.8 high. The customer's staff members will also be using devices such as their laptops, their tablets, their phones, etc., etc. They will be using MS Teams and Zoom as their communication softwares. Okay, and lastly, on part of the brief, the client wants to see as few cables as possible. Isn't that always the case?
Exactly.
So based on that, Marinus, I know it's not highly detailed, but is it enough information to work on, and where do we start?
No, absolutely. I always read, and that's why I like it in email. So I literally just printed that part of it, and we can break it down in stat. There's actually so much information in here, and we can definitely do a solution, at least a basic solution to this requirement. We can obviously offer some options to enhance the system that would obviously increase the budget at the end of the day. But yeah, this is a nice clean slate. I always look at these sort of emails as almost an exam, like an accounting exam or something. You know,
All right.
like where you had to read and you have to find like all the details in it. So it's like it's the challenge is enjoyed by me.
Okay,
So
fantastic.
12-seater. That's great. Knowing it's a 12-seater, knowing the room size and the fact that it's a 12-seater is important. Sometimes you have a really big room, but it's only a 12-seater. Sometimes perhaps there's like a bar area or something at the back of the boardroom that you don't need to cover in the UC solution at all. So it's important to know to make the solution as cost-effective as possible, as well as effectively covering the boardroom. If we didn't know it's a 12-seater and we assumed maybe this room was 12 by 6, and we didn't know the back 4 meters of the room is used for another purpose and not for the UC side. So it's important for us to know that we're focusing on a 12-seater. Obviously, if we had a boardroom layout, that would have helped if we knew the table was really close to the front wall, really far away from the front wall. Depending on how we cover it, that would influence, of course, our projector calculations, the screen size at the end of the day, and also the camera. Maybe microphones not so much, because you would have the 12-seater boardroom somewhere in the room and you can just adjust the microphones and ceiling speakers to that. But
Right. If I can interject
Yes.
there, does the shape of the boardroom table sort of come into play?
Yeah,
here?
absolutely.
Does
So-
it play a factor?
100%. Sometimes if it's a really wide, we know this room is 6 meters, but once
Yes.
again, if let's say the room was 10 meters, they could either use a little part in the middle for the boardroom table. It could be a narrow boardroom table with nothing in between, and you can still cover the entire boardroom table from left to right in with one mic. But
Okay.
as soon as you, perhaps the table is wider than 5 meters, which is the coverage, the diameter of the microphone coverage of the TCM1 mic from the biome, for example, which we're going to be using for this, that could be an issue. Then you might need 2 rows of microphones. If you're doing perhaps analog ceiling mics like the Biodynamic OM304s or whatever, it's important to know for that as well, because that obviously has slightly less coverage, and it makes you think, either should I do one row of mics down the middle, or should I do side-by-side mics? So each side of the table gets covered. So it's important to know the size of the table. But yes, so the client requires projector and motorized screen. So for that, we actually use a bunch of tools, and we'll be looking at them shortly as well.
Tools. I'm going to teach
Free
you guys about
to
that
use
as well.
tools, all web interface based. It really just completes the solution. It's the design process is to an extent subjective,
Okay.
but I use tools, objective tools like Projector Central and microphone calculator tools and stuff that's available from manufacturers to just determine the size. And obviously there's some formulas and stuff as well out there, but these tools are just so interactive and easy to use.
Nice. We will put these tools, the web addresses for these tools in the comment section below, guys. So hang on. Once the video is done, we will put them there for you to use.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So client requires projector motorized screen. That's obviously easy enough for us. We use the InFocus brand for projectors. Motorized screen, we use the Grandview screens, and we can just calculate the size required for that screen. Like I said, screens are very easy to interface with each other. There's no real requirement for that, and they're pretty much the same for projector as well. It's HDMI in. If we need to control it, that's obviously a slightly different scenario, but it's easy to use those. PTZ camera, we'll obviously be using one of our ALPHATron PTZ USB cameras.
Nice.
Microphone-wise, microphones will sort of pair with the head end in this case. We do biamp, and the biamp SCR25 C for the ceiling version would do it.
Yes, nice.
And the bulkhead means we can go ceiling, like you mentioned. We'll obviously look at a couple of ALPHATron ceiling speakers with that. The customer staff members will be using laptops, so bring your own device, so we don't really need to worry about too much of that. What we can do there is include, we have the ALPHATron ALF-W4K hub,
yes.
which does video switching and USB switching with the table grommets, which is like a pop-up with a button, and you can easily switch. So if the customer wants to be able to that's sort of the limitation of USB conferencing at the moment. I think you have to have a dedicated seat in the room to really be able, unless you're going wireless like the Biamp Modena or competitors to that product, of course.
Okay.
Wireless is obviously the one option, but if you're doing wireless, obviously adds a big expense to it, and some people feel the need to still use cables.
Okay, but in the brief it does say he
Yes.
wants to see as few cables
As few
as
cables
possible.
as possible, yes.
So based on that sentence there, is that what made the decision to go for in-ceiling microphones,
Yeah.
my apologies, as opposed to tabletop microphones?
Yeah, I think that's also, firstly, coverage on ceiling mics are usually better,
Okay.
just because of the distance that it's from the people, so it can actually get more people. And when a table scenario, you are slightly more limited to that. Also, most people prefer to not have, like you mentioned, they don't want to see too many cables.
Yes.
So let's use the too many cables. The few cables we have to use, we're going to use the USB and not
Okay.
microphone cables and stuff. And just drilling into tables and stuff, people are sometimes a little bit iffy about that, if I can say.
Yeah, a lot of them are iffy about that.
Yeah,
Like
and
really iffy.
people really like using tables with a cutout in the middle. So you like have nothing in the middle. So then you can't mount the mic in the middle. So ceiling mics and ceiling speakers are sort of my go-to, unless I can clearly not do one of them. Then unfortunately that's the limitation, and we have to work around that. But
So
ceiling is the
that's
first
an
option.
important question to ask,
Absolutely,
right? Like
yeah.
when the reseller is getting the brief from the client,
Yes.
that is a question he should have in mind
Absolutely.
to make sure. Like, will you be, can we or can the installer put holes in the table? If not, okay, cool. Then instead of going for tabletops, we'll go for in-ceiling.
Absolutely.
You know, so
and
so
is there a
yes.
ceiling? You know what I mean? Like we know there's a bulkhead in this scenario, but if we didn't know that, I would have probably assumed there was a ceiling and would have gone for a ceiling solution to start with, just to get the solution out. And you can always adapt afterwards if the more information comes through, and that becomes a limitation at a later stage. Then you need to, I guess, redesign. But
Cool.
yeah, and then we said obviously they're using bring your own device. Like I said, we can use W4K hub if they want to present from multiple spaces on the table. So we can do a pop-up in the front and pop-up in the back with HDMI and USB, or with just USB. And that would basically be like a USB switcher, switching between the devices, and one device at a time will be able to see the peripherals in the room. So the audio device, which is the Biamp Devio, as well as the camera, which will all run into that. So the Devio also bring together all the cables. So because you said few cables and not no cables, we can assume that we can run at least one USB.
Cool.
And that one USB would be basically running to the Devio, and the Devio would, as a USB hub, also bring in the camera and bring in all that. So the users really got one cable. The Devio also offers display link, which means you can do, if the drivers are installed in your machine, or Windows 10 machines has it integrated, you just connect the USB to your PC, and that actually converts USB to HDMI to video display with a display link.
So in this solution, the central point here is the Devio.
100%. That's sort of
box
the hub.
itself.
And that's the thing with the Devio, to remember, is that it's not a dedicated hard-coding VC like you would have expected 4 or 5 years ago. That's, I guess it's still in the market, but it's slowly getting phased out because of everybody wanting to do USB conferencing. People rather now go to a dedicated in-room PC, which you could easily add to the solution as well with a W4K hub. You could switch between the in-room PC and the bring your own devices. But yes, the Devio is in essence the hub. That's mostly, it's a single point of communication for us, single USB connection. Everything else sort of links that. But the Devio is not a dedicated device. It's not a PC of its own. It's actually just putting your PC on steroids. So it's bringing all the USB stuff in.
Nice.
But also, more importantly, the rest of that sentence, tablets and phones. If we, by standard, I would assume they might want to do a Bluetooth call with the tablets and stuff. I mean, if they're using a tablet as such, I wouldn't by default expect them to want to use the in-room cameras and stuff. So the Devio also offers Bluetooth. And the cool thing is you can bridge. So if you do a Teams call over USB with a PC in the room, and you want to add somebody with Bluetooth, somebody connects to the Devio with Bluetooth, and the Teams participant and the Bluetooth participant could hear each other. So it's also
pretty cool.
acting as a bridge. So you can really do a 3-way conference in reality in that scenario.
So 2 on Teams, 1 on Bluetooth kind of thing.
Yeah, so you on Teams as the in-room participant, a far-side participant on Teams. Obviously, you can't run. Well, you can. I guess you can add more participants to the Teams call, which is fine. And then of course they could all be bridged to a Bluetooth call, which could be on Teams or Zoom or whatever as well.
Sure.
Yeah, so I mean, for that case, if the client specifies at a later stage, no, but we want the participants to be able to connect to the in-room camera and everything like that. That's where I haven't actually really done a solution like that. I mean, there's just so many different options, like you mentioned. There's so many devices in the market, and even though we as distributors know Biamp, we also obviously can get advice from manufacturers at any stage and just test stuff.
Absolutely.
Easy enough it would be to grab a Biamp monitor from stock, for example, and just set it up and test and see how efficient it would be in bringing the in-room camera into your phone, how that would work. There's no better way than actually testing that.
Testing
so
it, yeah.
a lot of the times I do spend some time on learning how things would work, especially our products, or maybe somebody wants to integrate another product with one of our products. If we can get our hands on that product, or obviously the internet's great for research stuff. But yes, sometimes you need to just physically test something and make sure it works and make sure it will work for your solution.
No, absolutely. I've seen you a couple of times actually downstairs in the service department just playing with stuff. So, okay. So we thought you were just
Now you
playing
know
around,
why.
but
Now you
you're
know
actually
why.
working, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. So now it seems like we have a good understanding of this brief, right?
Yeah.
So what comes after that? So you've got all these ideas
Yes.
and you've got all these things you want to put in there. So what comes next?
Absolutely. I mean, one of the main factors is cost effectiveness, easy to operate. There's all these requirements you sort of need to do and really figure out what's going to be the easiest for the client and also the most cost effective, because we are in a competitive market. Our integrators are competing against each other. Some integrating partners would use perhaps a second or third quote from another supplier. So, I mean, we need to also be comparative in price. So it's important to not read too much into a spec and overdo it, like
Yes.
adding a additional wireless device, even though that's not a requirement. That's easily something that could be discussed at a later stage, and make sure that the solution would work and whatever. So yeah, so cost effective for me is a big thing. Also, like, I feel unbiased in that point of view.
Yeah.
Not being in sales, but being in technical. I'm not commission driven, should I say? So to me, it's about a good solution.
Yes.
And I can sort of forget about the other factors that obviously needs to be that exist. So
Right. Nice. That's actually quite a lot of factors you need
Absolutely.
to consider. I mean, it's not just sitting down and say, okay, well, we need distribution here and this
Yeah.
and that. You're actually taking quite a few factors before you even start with a BOQ.
Absolutely. I mean, there's also, just like you mentioned, there's so many products out there, and some of them in our stable that we need to be able to work around and decide what is the best one and why that is not the best one. Like a classic example is we have in ALPHATEC we have two amps. We have the boardroom sort of specific amplifiers in the PA2B, the PA100V, and the PA100W, which is perfect for boardrooms. It's a very small installation, where we also have the mixer amps.
Yes.
With Bluetooth and everything. But in this scenario, for example, I would feel more comfortable with doing the professional amp, the professional boardroom amp, rather than a BGM amp that's dedicated for BGM. That's not necessarily rack mountable and slightly bigger, and it's got Bluetooth. Now it's another Bluetooth source in the room. Yeah, so I mean, where of course the one amp is more cost effective than the other one, it's not necessarily suited for that. I mean, that's a nice place that you can easily cut down if need to on the budget when it comes to that stage. But there's also about getting the right product, something that I feel is the right product for the boardroom without really obviously going over the top. It's as easy. I guess the best comparison would be Alphatron ceiling speakers versus Bose ceiling speakers. If the client's got a taste for Bose ceiling speakers, absolutely. That's going to come at a price where if you're just literally doing video conferencing in this, there's the Alphatron ceiling speakers would be absolutely perfect.
Yes.
I mean, it's got great full frequency response and everything, but it obviously doesn't have the Bose name connected to it. But absolutely, that is once again application.
Okay, so again, these sort of things need to be in the brief, like budget and
Yes.
brand specific, that
Absolutely.
sort of thing. So from here, we don't have a mention of budget. We also don't have a mention of brand.
Yeah.
So in this solution, you would probably stick with the ALPHATron seating speakers,
Absolutely.
the Devio unit,
Yes.
grand view screen,
Yes.
in-focus
In-focus
projectors, some
projector,
pop-ups.
power light brackets, pop-ups. Absolutely, that's the pop-up is also always a big discussion.
Yes, yes, it
because
is.
now it's actually something the client would see. He doesn't really care about the projector too much. The screen size is obviously important. You need to make sure it fits. But in reality, the interface, that's why it's called pop-up's called an interface, because
Yes.
that is what the client's interfacing
Yes, exactly.
with. So you need to, the look and feel of that, we can, like I mentioned, if we're doing the W4K hub, which will switch HMI and USB for us, we can look at the table grommets for that, which is a very little neat round cutout in the table with HMI and USB. Or we can look at the TSC6. I'm a big fan of the TSC6 pop-ups from ALPHATron because they do the pull-out cables. So
Very
nobody's
versatile.
gonna nobody's gonna take your cables. That is sometimes really a concern.
That is a big concern. You know, a lot of times when I see clients,
Yeah.
they don't want a pop-up that you can plug cables in. They want to
Yeah.
pull cables out. And
Absolutely.
it's always, no, the cables go missing. You know,
Absolutely, and it's not even intentional all the time
Yeah.
or malicious. It just happens.
It just happens.
People are leaving the meeting and they just pack up or and whatever, and they end up taking the cables with.
Yeah,
Or because
that's
they
a
need
nice USB, I'll
yeah,
just take it.
they get a new monitor and they need an HDMI cable. Where are we going to find one? In the boardroom.
Yeah, there we go. Constant supply.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, so we've got a basic solution down.
Yeah.
So how do you tie everything up? Meaning, how do you ensure that all the products work together to fulfill this brief?
Absolutely. Like, I mean, we obviously have a range of products in our stable, and we've tested at least most combinations of them or combinations that was required.
Okay.
And solutions or requests seem to, there's a trend in requests. Like you would get a trend where for a month long people are just requesting multiple USB cameras in a setup. For
Oh,
example.
that does happen.
And
That does happen.
So,
yes.
so then it's important for me to either find a solution from a competitor or a solution our own stable, test that as long as possible, and see. Okay, we can actually implement this as a solution, which we obviously have in the SC41, the seamless switcher, which we can then HDMI convert to USB, which is really something that has been happening a lot recently.
We'll do a show on SC41 for you guys shortly.
Coming up next. So yes, so with our products, it's a lot easier because we know we've paired all of these products. There's some, I mean, RCA out of a Devio can really go into any other amp. There's no
Yeah.
interfacing happening really there. But, and the same, like I mentioned, the screen. So for that screen, a motorized screen, I would, for example, use one of the very cool tool from Grandview called the power synchro unit. So whenever the projector draws power from the power supply because it's been switched on, it drops the screen. So once again, no control, easy to use
Oh,
whenever the
look at
projector
that.
switches on.
Like a 12-volt trigger. kind of
100%,
thing.
100%.
Yeah,
It's like a
nice,
wireless
nice.
12 volt or trigger. So for the projector and screen, you don't really have to worry about it too much. The PTZ cameras, because it's USB, and our PTZ cameras works with any platform. We haven't come across a platform where it doesn't work, and that's one benefit of USB. There's a lot of drawbacks with USB, like extending it is always a problem.
Oh, it is,
There's a couple of shortfalls of USB, but the nice thing is that it is. The U stands for universal, and they didn't lie about it.
Yeah,
so,
they didn't.
it works with everything, and like the microphones in this case are proprietary, of course, the Devio.
Yes.
So yes, but there's also some things you need to know once you start dealing with a client. Some clients, one shortfall, for example, of the Devio, or not shortfall, but it was never designed for that intention, is that you can't get. There's no way to easily get the microphones into a recorder. The audio out of the Devio only brings out the far side. Otherwise, you would get feedback. I mean, that's the general use case. So.
Okay.
But if as soon as the client mentions, okay, we want to do recordings, then I would advise them to look at using the Teams or Zoom integrated recording, so you can record both sides, audio and video. That's probably the best option. It saves it on the cloud. If the client still requires some recording, then we need to change the system, make the system a bit bigger. And of course, comes at a price. Change to a VT4, for example. Open architecture DSP from Biamp with the same mics, but that will allow me to program the system to do a dedicated audio output for
Right.
recorder. But
okay, and
so
that
I
would
mean,
go
knowing
through
these things,
like a separate sort of recorder.
absolutely. If
know?
it's maybe like a hardware recorder
Yes.
that people want to do, but we would obviously be able to supply the audio side and the video recording, like our ALPHATron cameras do. The dash cabs, the USB 3 versions, do USB and HDMI simultaneously. So that's a good benefit of that. You can run HDMI into a video recorder with the audio from a Tessera, and you've got a hardware backup recording. But
Nice.
you probably need to record the screen. The far side participants are always an issue. How are you going to record them? Audio is easy, but we probably need to somehow record their video.
Okay.
But I mean that's slightly off topic for this. But do you think we should have a look at the tools?
Well,
We've
actually
built
we
so much
should. Yeah,
hype
let's show you
about
guys
it.
what the tools look like. We're not going to get into it, but we're just going to sort of show you sort of where they're available and what they look like. So they're easy, they're intuitive. I mean, I can do it. The genius here obviously can do it.
It's actually tools for me so that I don't have to do all Noel's work.
Yeah, there we go.
Are we ready?
Okay,
Great
so on your screens now, guys, we are currently on the Biamp Parlay ceiling microphone calculator. So this is an awesome tool, Marinus. Do you want to take us through it?
Yeah, 100%. Like I mentioned, it's objective. I feel very comfortable at presenting this to a client because it's not my opinion. I'm not selling something that I need to doubt myself about. I think self-doubt is one of the more important things in solution design.
You guys have self-doubt?
Absolutely, like that. I mean, that's really important. The other day I had a discussion with somebody else who designed solutions, and I think that's probably the more crucial thing in solution design is a little bit of self-doubt.
Oh, okay. Is that sort of what keeps
questioning
you,
everything?
That's what I was
Absolutely,
gonna say,
absolutely.
keeps you questioning. Okay.
Yes. So easy enough. There's 2 TCM ceiling mics available. You choose TCM-X, TCM1, say how high the mic is, the acoustics of the room, the size of the room, and it tells you how many microphones.
So this is actually really cool. So if you as a reseller go to site, it's important to try and sort of take heed of what the room's acoustics are. Like if there's carpeting, if there's pictures on the wall, any acoustic material like we've got over here. Those sort of things do play a factor in the mic's pickup and what the other audience hears on the other side of your VC.
100%. Signal to noise ratio.
Correct. Signal to noise ratio. What is that? Just kidding. But yeah, so these factors all sort of come into play. So once you as the integrator get used to this sort of calculator, you can sort of learn what sort of questions to ask and what to look out for when you're doing a spec, right? So that you can fulfill some of the parameters that are in here to get a really solid spec.
Absolutely. I mean, I with no information, I have to assume it's down the middle. And I know assumption is not always the best thing, but I feel if I can mention what my assumptions were, then if those assumptions are any different, then I mean that is unfortunately with information, it's a machine. Whatever comes in goes out. It's a sausage machine.
Yeah, and as you can see, guys, we didn't get that on the brief. We don't know what the room's acoustics
so
are.
I have to assume something.
Yes.
I can assume worst case scenario, but like I said, we are competitive to other people who's not necessarily going to assume worst case scenario.
Yes.
I'm not going to assume best case scenario and assume this sounds like a recording studio inside because. Let's be honest, that doesn't happen.
Yes,
I don't think
don't
that has
assume,
never happened.
guys. We all know what assuming is. Don't even go that route.
But
okay, so what are we looking at here? So we've done now the ceiling height.
Good acoustics. There's a very cool little write-up about what these acoustics mean, and you can obviously test them physically as well. But I mean, just literally your hands clapping in the room and just saying, well, this sounds a lot worse than the other room I've been in, or maybe another room we've deployed it in. So as a salesperson, details, obviously, as much detail as possible.
Yes,
but
detail, guys, detail.
like a bit of photos would be a good opportunity, and maybe just a general comment. Like it sounds really bad if you're standing in the room and you can hear yourself reflecting from the walls with no amplification in the room. Then it's pretty bad acoustics. I mean, the microphone. If you can hear yourself in a room acoustically, then you know that the microphone's probably also going to hear you twice.
Yeah, absolutely. Guys, remember, if it sounds like a bathroom, it's going to sound like a bathroom.
Yeah,
okay.
absolutely.
The only thing that will fix that is acoustic treatment and some carpet.
Yeah, physics is physics. Some mics are better at because it's gating and gain sharing auto mixers and like these parlay mics are beam forming and that's sort of what they do and they try and focus on the speaker, but I mean, there's just so much you can do.
Yeah, remember we chatted about that in the last episode about beamforming parlay microphones. So again, this is something we need to take into consideration as well, guys.
Yeah.
Okay,
absolutely. So that's
getting
the one
back
tool.
to this. So on room acoustics, you're going to put it on good, right?
Yeah.
Okay, which is
somewhere down the middle. Obviously, this calculator is also meant to be conservative in a way. Because it needs to remain objective.
Yes,
and they want people to have the correct solution. So this is obviously a very mathematical equation from their side. But there's a couple of things we can do. We can adjust the mic height and so on. But so I mean, this is a great tool. The other tool we use, it's a very new tool. I've only used it once or twice. It basically replaces me as a solutions architect. But
Don't tell him.
so yeah, so you can literally add a room. So this is a bit more intense than. Oh, it's not going to allow me. I need to put in the dimensions and stuff. That's now in feet. But in essence, this would do a bit more than the previous one, where this would do table shape, table size. It will give you a full BOQ from the processor to the mics to the ceiling speakers, if you're using biome ceiling speakers. So this is more sort of going to guide you towards the Microsoft Teams and Zoom bundles.
Right. Okay. So before we carry on there, this one here, all right, this is a conference room designer, okay, which you can get on the Biamp webpage. We'll post the links in the comments later. But this, as you've said, is sort of more intricate. So here you can put in the shape of the boardroom table.
If
as
you have
can
it,
see there on screen. If you've got it, yeah, cool, then we can put it in there. So it's a lot more accurate in terms of what it does. And as Marinus said, it does generate a professional-looking BOQ that you, as the reseller, can actually take to your end user and show him the mic coverage and everything like that. So apologies for interjecting there, Marinus. But,
no, not at all. Thank you.
Yeah,
That
so
allows
as
me an
we can
opportunity
see there, we're busy with that.
to work it out. Yeah, so like I said, this is more going to take you into the direction of team bundles. Do you want ceiling mics, pendant mics? Let's say pendant mics. We just want to focus on this specific room, not the full room. We're remaining on good acoustic speaker coverage. Once again, we want to focus on the table. So now and that's like I mentioned, if there's a bunch of stuff happening in the back of the room, we want to do a focused approach.
Yes.
We want to design it for the table and not for the rest of the room.
Not for the surrounding
because
area.
that's not the requirement for this room necessarily.
No, it's
so I think I might have too many seats in there. We can choose the family. Let's choose Devio.
Oh, look at
and
that.
there's our two pendant mics, 4 ceiling speakers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 seats, 2 at the head of the table. So there's actually a 14-seater, but if you drop the seats on the one side where the projector screen is, it's going to be a 12-seater.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, that just gives you an idea of the speaker. But once, like I mentioned, this is going to try and this is pushing you towards a bundle.
Yes.
Because of obviously Microsoft Teams certified devices, the Biamp. So this is pushing you towards the kit that they put together to do that.
Yes, just so that the viewers know, Biamp has put together a couple of bundles, which as we get them in, we will do videos on. Which are really great bundles, and they're easy to unbox, they're easy to install, one button setup, the whole toots. It's actually really, really great. So, sorry, Maurice, let's go.
No, but it comes with a price tag because you know it's a team certified system, so that we do sometimes get the request for that. But it doesn't mean that the rest of the stuff doesn't work with Teams.
No, absolutely, yes.
And there's it comes with a price tag, of course. Slightly off topic for this scenario.
This is my favorite.
The Bose Music System Designer, which just a very nice little tool, uses basic calculations to work it out. Punch in the room and the ceiling height. People are seated or standing. So this is more maybe for restaurants. And nothing says you can't use it in boardrooms.
Yes.
It gives you the coverage option of minimum, standard, or premium, which just changes the calculations of the maximum distance that the speakers be spaced from each other depending on the height.
And that's very important, is speaker placement.
Absolutely.
You know,
and
how
it's all
far
dependent on
away-
the height.
Yes.
And if people are seated or standing, I know it sounds silly, but your eyes are lower when you're seated than when you're standing.
Yes.
So we're working between the distance from your ears to the distance to the ceiling speaker, and that distance is the crucial distance.
Right.
Because speaker coverage is given in degrees, and the further you're away, the more coverage you get in meters.
I was actually going to mention that the higher your ceiling speaker is, the more coverage the
100%.
ceiling speaker gives.
100%.
Okay, fantastic.
And then obviously also different speakers has different dispersions. The bigger the driver, usually the less coverage you get.
Right.
So and you can say modern or classic design. That's more about the two new ranges with Bose. You can say what you're trying to achieve dB wise, background and foreground. That usually affects the wattage they suggest you tap it at and the amp selection rather than the speaker selection. So I mean, basically, I didn't even change anything in this, but it's saying we should use 2 DM6s.
Okay,
and it suggests a couple of amps and the distance from the wall and distance between speakers and stuff.
All right, so Bose does it really easily. It gives you a BOQ and it gives you a small diagram like the Biamp one. It shows you speaker placements and everything. So it actually makes things really easy for you guys.
unless the room is not square, which is most cases.
Yeah.
Because they are usually that's the only reason I'm still employed is because they don't build square rooms. Thanks to those architects building round buildings.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
But yeah, absolutely. This is a great start. Like you could
Yes.
also, if the room is really asymmetrical or whatever, you could break it down into pieces and maybe just confirm this. This is also a good idea to see. Okay, I can actually space speakers 3 meters apart from each other, or 4 meters apart from each other, to achieve that.
So would it be safe to say that this is not like a set in stone kind of thing? This is just to give you a very sort of basic outline of what will work in this room. You as the integrator or the installer kind of need to also work with your experience here as well to determine if that is indeed the correct solution for this client.
Yeah, this is not new math. This is old math that we've been given in training sessions from Bose and documentation design guides from Bose for different ranges of products. What they just did now was implement that into a user-friendly interface. So this is not new math, and it's based on factors when they calculate the distance and stuff between speakers, because they know the coverage of the speakers.
Yes.
The factor comes in with minimum coverage, standard coverage, and premium coverage, and that's sort of with the ceiling height, or the difference between ear height and ceiling height times the factor, in essence, gives you a good idea of how far the speakers need to be spaced. But now, I mean, now it's it's easily available online. And you can also play around with width and height and especially height of the ceiling height.
No, that's
depending
an
how you're gonna
important
mount
factor,
it.
right?
Absolutely. So yeah, I mean, great tool. Once again, these are all calculations. These aren't difficult to get a hold of, these calculations, but it's nice that it's all in one space, and obviously also eliminates the possibility of mathematical errors.
Oh, yes.
So-
Human error.
Human error, exactly.
Nice.
Okay, and then the last tool that I want to just discuss quickly is Projector Central. Until recently, Projector Central actually also included recommended seating distance,
Right.
which was really cool. Unfortunately, that has been dropped off Projector Central, but this is a great idea. Basically takes the information from the manufacturer. In this case, we have an in-focus laser projector, 5,500 lumens, and it gives us a great idea of how far away we are from the projector from the screen to the projector. So in case there's an aircon exactly at the distance, this also gives you some leeway because it's got a zoom lens. So minimum, maximum distance from there. We can make sure that it will work if we maybe have a ceiling plan and we know it's the traffic in the ceiling, maybe some LED lights, whatever. We can find a good space for it. Very importantly, we can also see the lumens or the brightness required for the room. So this is great for low ambient light. The screen is really big. I'm going to just change. It's like a 220-inch screen. So 120-inch screen, for example, and we're ceiling mounted projector. So room for high ambient light. So we're pretty good with brightness in this case. Also, obviously, a very easy way to see the height of the screen, so we need to take that into consideration. We have a 2.8 high ceiling, so maybe the room, let's say the room is maybe a bit too long. We can't really compromise the height of the screen. We want the screen to be a meter away from the floor. Otherwise, just sight lines becomes an issue. So there's a couple of factors with the screen size projector. There's also that calculation. Basically, the furthest seat divide by 5. 5 is the factor that's sort of between an Excel spreadsheet and a PowerPoint presentation or AutoCAD. So that answer gives you the height of the screen required. But if that's more than 1.8 meters, then we can't really go more than 1.8 meters high of screen that's 1.8 meters high. So 120-inch, I think is about 6. We can always easily change the image size to meters. 1.6 meter drop. So in this case, we can easily jump the image size to 1.8, which we know we can do. And inches, convert it back to inches, 133-inch screen. That's so 133-inch screen is as big as we can go here.
Okay.
We can obviously double check the math and make sure that we're not going too big, because each screen also has a minimum viewing distance.
Yes.
So if people are really up and close to the screen, you also don't want to go too big. So it's really a weighing exercise. I think a 120-inch probably for this room would be perfect. But once again, like that is pretty much up to the solution at the end of the day.
Nice.
yeah, so those are the tools. Those are the main
Very
tools.
nice.
There's obviously some PDF exchange editor and stuff we use to plot speakers and StarDraw. We use StarDraw for schematics. Schematics is another great tool to
Yes,
make
absolutely.
sure that everybody involved in the integrator could know what sort of cables to use, how long the cable runs would be. They would probably need to be able to work out how long the cable runs would be, because I wouldn't necessarily know the routes
Yes.
to each of them, but at least they would know, okay, we need to run a USB extender from the table to the camera. Let's figure out a route to that. So this
Yes.
cable would be that long. We require that.
Nice.
But yeah, schematics also, it's a great tool to know this connects to that.
Yes.
And it actually really shows you flaws in your design very quickly.
So is that kind of like a thing to check your design?
Absolutely, it's really good. I mean, in most cases, if the schematic is not a requirement necessarily from a client, I might, in my mind, do a bit of a schematic and think, okay, this is we connecting to this, and just think it through, inputs to outputs, and that's from, I guess, programming processes, DSPs and stuff, where you learn that inputs on the left, outputs on the right, and signal flow from
Yes.
left to right.
Left to right, yeah.
And yeah, so exactly that. So schematic's a great thing, whether it's a formal schematic for somebody or whether it's an informal schematic for myself, to make sure everything connects. But also, like I said, there's a lot of repetitiveness sometimes in trends. So I mean, if I've spec'd the system 5 times before, the room size maybe changes, the amount of microphones changes, but I know a Devio takes the USB camera
Yes.
and that connects to you. So I mean, that is not new, but whenever there's a new trend that happens, the first time you really need to, and probably the second time, because of the self-doubt, you need to work towards getting the solution working and seeing in our schematics. And that's the thing with us. A lot of the solutions are designed. It's not just necessarily a box drop.
Yes.
Like the Devio is a great all-in-one solution with adding a couple of speakers and perhaps an amp, or using the integrated amp, and then obviously the display devices. That's basically a bundle that's easy to use, easy to set up, and easy to install. But as soon as like we mentioned, a dual camera setup for Teams, immediately that becomes a more difficult solution, and there's some interaction that needs to happen between products and stuff that needs to be
Right.
tested.
Sure, Marinus, I'm actually really loving this discussion so far. It's feature-packed, it's intensive, we're getting to the point, 100%. So, in closing, Marinus, what are some tips that you can offer to our clients for when they start building their own solutions?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of literature online. We do a lot of research online. There is, like, if you take the BIOMS website, for example, the ALPHA TEC website as well, we have these little solutions. Like I said, there's trends. So what they would, as suppliers and manufacturers, would do is look at that and put together a solution that is easy to use. There's probably a one-page PDF document explaining what the device is doing. So do your research. There's definitely a solution out there for you. If there isn't, then obviously have a chat to us. Or if you're not sure what's the best stuff to interface with. But yeah, I think online, like, don't be scared of online research. I know there's a lot of stuff on the internet that you shouldn't believe.
Jeez.
But when it comes to manufacturers' websites, you can believe them. Yes, I mean, also as much info as possible from the client. It's also important to inform the clients. I think that's sometimes a problem where if you are meeting the client, you also need to guide their requirements and requests, and mention to them, okay, if you want to go wireless, it comes at a cost.
Yes.
That's going to add, and now it's maybe a rollout of 50 rooms. That's a really growing cost. So it's important to be realistic and sort of know what's in the market, and then guide the customer, the end user, to, like, this is probably the best solution. I know you want all the features, but maybe if we compromise on this and then this, we can really get a compact solution that always works. And that's also the other important thing, a working solution. It needs to work and be consistent and proved and trusted. So, yeah, I mean, and when it comes to information gathering from the end user, that is the link between us and the end user at the end of the day. So, but stuff like room sizes, acoustics in the room, the boardroom layout, as much info as possible. I know it's not always easy to get that information. It's not always on hand. But yeah, absolutely. And what other advice would you give, Noel?
Well, I actually, to be honest with you, Marinus, listening to what you've just said now, I can sort of ascertained that it's important to get the brief right from the beginning.
Yeah.
So, you as the integrator or the installer, the reseller, he needs to ask the questions.
Absolutely.
Like, what do you want from the room? What is your expectation?
Yes.
How many people are going to be in here? How many people at the same time? Those sort of open-ended questions that garner more than just a yes and no response, right? And I could also sort of pick up as well that if you get the brief wrong from the beginning, your entire solution is going to be wrong.
Yeah, or at least not accomplish what maybe the end user would need. But the problem with that is you only find that out after it's been installed.
Yes.
So yes,
so it's very important to get
Yes.
that correct information
Yes.
in the information
And
gathering
ideally on
stage.
paper, because
Yes.
then at least there's some something concrete that's
Yes.
on black and white. So
Okay.
yeah, absolutely. I think I think that's pretty much the main things that you need to consider as an integrator. But yeah, I mean, solutions. Yeah, we obviously that's a service we offer. But if you walk into the room and you sort of have an idea of already what you like to use in these sort of spaces, then if you know what the limitations of the system, you can easily ask those questions.
Yes.
Like I mentioned about the mics, that you can't record Devio mics out into the external recorder.
Yes.
And knowing something like that, if let's say the customer says no, but we want a recording, well, like I mentioned, you advise them. Well, have you considered using the Teams recording or the Zoom recording? It's there. It records both sides. It will record the presentation that's being shared, and it's for free. It comes with the package.
With the Teams package.
With the
yeah.
Teams package. So just knowing sort of limitations, and I guess sort of getting an idea of what you already have in mind for the solution, and then that makes the question so much easier that you need to ask.
So what I'm getting out of this conversation is that know the products, know the limitations of the products, know how far you can push them, and if a spec exceeds what that product can do, look at something else.
I mean, if there is something else, yeah, absolutely. Like you're not gonna. The Devio once again is a great example. It's got 3 ways of getting audio out: HMI audio out. So if you're using a screen with a soundbar, sorted. If it's got RCA out, if you need to connect an external amp, it's got a built-in 20-watt amp. You are probably you only should use one of those outputs. Otherwise, you might have some other issues. But there's 3 options. You're not going to use all 3 of them, but I mean that doesn't mean it's a bad solution because there's options. But yeah, I mean there's no other product that to scale down from that's really going to give you that all-in-one solution with the mics and everything.
Ah, fantastic. Right, guys, so that brings us to the close of today's episode. Thank you so much for joining us. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the comments. We will get to them and we will answer, and we won't forget to put the links down for the tools that we just showed you online now as well. Marinus, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your wealth of knowledge. As you guys can see, there's lots of factors to take into account, so try and get the brief right. Try and get as much information as you can so that guys like Marinus who build the solution know what they're working with. So again, Marinus, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Noel. Thanks for having me.
Right, guys, as usual, please don't forget to like the video. Also click the subscribe button there as well so you don't miss out on when we have new videos. Also, please head over to our website, www.alpha-tec.co.za. Click on the training tab. There's a whole host of videos there for you guys to watch. Again, guys, thank you so much. See you soon.
Thanks.